conference has been so far. It's been absolutely fascinating. And I'd like to thank you for joining us, for which I hope will be a rich, thought-provoking and maybe even slightly uncomfortable conversation. This session focuses on trust in AI, which is as timely as it is tangled. Because when we speak about trust in AI, what do we really mean? Do we mean trust in the model? Do we mean trust in the developer, the data, or the terms and conditions that we ultimately never read? As we're living through a moment where the pace of technological change is outstripping the frameworks we've traditionally relied on from a legal, ethical, and sometimes even logical standpoint, it's important that we step back and identify the gaps in our understanding when it comes to the impact of AI on society. And those gaps don't just represent an issue of governance, they're more human than that. Trust is emotional currency. It's hard to earn, easy to lose, and in a world where artificial intelligence continues to dominate, trust seems to be experiencing serious depreciation. So to help us unpack this topic, I'm joined by three extraordinary thinkers who each bring a unique lens to the discussion. So first up, we have Stephanie Antonian, theologian turned AI ethicist and founder of technology consultant Astora. You heard that right, she was going to be a nun. Before she turned her attention to tech, we have Alex Leathard, civil engineer turned technology consultant and founder of Hackathon Consulting, and then Paul Mallaghan, co-owner and strategy director at creative agency We Are Tilt. And together we'll explore what trust in AI actually means, who gets to define it, and what it takes practically and philosophically to embed responsibility, not just in the code we write, but in the decisions that we make. Whew, there's quite a lot there, isn't there? Quite a lot for you to all digest. But so let's kick off with the first question. Some of these are directed at individuals to lead on, and then if other members of the panel want to jump in, they can, and some of the questions are to everybody. So this first question is to everybody, and I'll start with Stephanie. The question is, trust in AI is a loaded term, but what does trust in AI mean to you, and who ultimately gets to decide if AI is trustworthy?
Hi everybody. Okay, that's a big question, but ultimately trust is very simple. It's not difficult to be someone who's trustworthy. You just have to be in integrity, be honest, and let people decide for themselves whether they can trust you or not. That's really all it is. I think one of the biggest challenges in AI is that it's not trustworthy. That's one of the big flaws. There's been a lot of betrayals of trust, a lot of betrayals of the law, breaches of social contracts, breaches of personal rights, and people don't trust it. And if we want to make it trustworthy, it has to become trustworthy. It's not about convincing people to trust you. It's sort of like, imagine if you're dating somebody who's cheating on you constantly and being like, why don't you trust me? It's just silly. Like, a lot of this conversation is nonsense and it's based on coercion, not trust. And that's why it feels so icky, because we can't really talk about that. If you were genuinely trustworthy, if you actually built a product that was trustworthy, you wouldn't need a division to make you trustworthy. You wouldn't be out there promoting and marketing and telling people to trust me. And so I think we've got to keep things simple and go back to the basic design principles of what does it mean to be a respectable product and to build a respectable product that is genuinely in integrity and is not out there to exploit, but actually out there to help. And if we focus there, then it's not that complicated.
That's super interesting, and there's probably some stuff I'd like to unpack in that, which is that if you look at the stats for usage of things like ChatGPT in the States, it is getting a high amount of engagement with people actually trusting the output. So although Salman said we'd never put this live, we'd never put this to the open web, and we'd never betray your trust, we've actually been coerced into believing that it is, you know, that the output is good, and it hasn't cheated on us, as you put it, but it has, and I think we all need to remember that. So I'm going to throw this over to Alex, who comes at it from a sort of regulatory standpoint.
Well, I think I would agree with the notion that it's the users who are going to decide whether or not something is actually trustworthy. We don't necessarily know where the bar for that lies right now. The problem, as I see it, is that that bar is very low. People demonstrably trust these things way more than perhaps they ought to, which may be a problem with or a barrier that comes up because of education or understanding of these technologies, of how they're being broadcast and put in front of us. You should trust this oracle, it's entirely reliable, or if it does make a mistake, it's your responsibility to fix it. I'm going to tell you when that happens. But I would also say, how do you how do you unpack these things and make them trustworthy? And something I often say to people is, if we're going to talk about language models, for example, these are basically lab experiments that have grown outside the lab. They are not robust in a way that allows us to interrogate what is happening inside the model. We cannot completely deconstruct why it produces the specific outcomes that it projects. Should we not all take a step back and actually think about rebuilding these technologies in such a way that we can get that level of insight so that you can trust, if not the exact sequence of characters that it produces, but the decision-making process, if you want to call it that has caused it to emit those characters. I think that's where we need to go in terms of building trust and establishing trust with people.
Okay, thank you. Finally, over to you, Paul. And when we spoke, you likened trust to authenticity. And you talked about that, where's that line between what is authentic and where's the uncanny valley start?
I said that, did I? Okay. No, I think that is absolutely spot on. I think I just want to take a little bit of what you're both saying there, because we know that we are quite susceptible to confident bullshitters. That is basically, like, that is what ChatGPT...
I built a career on it.
Don't
dump that out too much.
Right now. But I think that there's something, reminds me of the illusory truth effect, where if you hear something a few times, or you hear it said confidently, then you are much more likely to believe it regardless of the source. That might refer to a certain president who uses that technique fairly regularly. But I think we're so susceptible to that we are quite vulnerable. And I mean all of us, like no matter how intelligent we think we are, or how smarter than the machines we think we are. And I think about trust, and I'm coming at this very much from the perspective of someone who runs a creative agency. So we're not building necessarily the LLM, we're not involved in building an LLM. We're involved in using it, understanding it, and thinking about what the implications if we get this wrong, and what the implications if what does it mean to be creative in the world of LLMs? So trust for us, we've kind of come to some certain level of understanding that we have to be the ones imposing our own guidelines to some degree, because there's not a lot happening elsewhere. So that's kind of where we've ended up. Genuineness though, like being genuine, is 100% part, and I think that's something that maybe we'll talk about in this later too, about where does the human part of this come in? Where is the human in the puzzle when you're talking about creativity in particular? But yeah, I don't trust AI, but I use it all the time.
Yeah, that's a common bit of feedback you get from people, isn't it? I'm very cynical about it, but I still use it all the time because it's super useful, super helpful. We're a stakeholder in the conversation, but we're not really part of the conversation. We have to rely on governance frameworks, which are sort of minimal at best. So where do you see, and given that we need to rely on those governance frameworks from the state or from the organisations building these tech platforms or corporates, where do you see the biggest disconnect between those governance frameworks and the way AI is actually being developed or built in the real world? And that goes to Alex first.
Yes, sir.
Well, a lot of the businesses that we see working with AI day to day, or working with any sort of computer decision-making technology, there's a real focus on accelerating as quickly as you can, on doing everything as fast as you can, being, if not first to market, then very, very early to market, because the perceived risks of not participating, that FOMO, that fear of missing out, is so enormous and so all-consuming that organisations just aren't thinking clearly about what are the potential downside risks, what are the potential impacts of deploying this technology. And we're starting now to kind of push people on, before you take this concept to market, how do you think it's going to affect people? How do you think it's going to affect their legal rights? How do you think it's going to affect their behaviour? Not just the kind of raw value of, I'm going to generate certain economic return for my organisation off the back of this. And when it comes to things like frameworks, we're kind of twisting a little bit in the wind in the UK to some respect, I believe. And I don't think the lack of a position or a lack of regulation from the government is equivalent to stating your position very clearly and forthrightly. So I tend to kind of steer people down that route of, you know, the EU AI Act, something like that, let's think very clearly about the purpose for which your product, service, etc. is going to be put. What is the context for this? Would we classify this as high risk or not? And if it is, let's go down that route of doing some impact assessment and evaluation of how we think this would play out in the medium to long term.
I am a bit of a broken record when we talk about governance and regulation, because I am super in favour of it. I've worked in tech for a very long time, and I'm a massive cynic. But we live in a laissez-faire capitalist economy, which favours regulation after the fact. And I just don't think unless we completely upend our economic system that we're going to change that.
So we talk a lot about AI being this enormously revolutionary thing that's going to disrupt our entire world. Is that a sacred cow that AI is not allowed to disrupt?
That's a good point. That is a good point. I can see, Stephanie, sorry, but I was going to come to you so that you're not the last one in the questions again, but I can see Stephanie's itching to say something. So Stephanie, would you like to weigh in on that?
Well, I was just going to bite the bait on, you know, is AI not allowed to disrupt? And it's like, well, no, not within, like there's a limit that it can disrupt. And there is a social contract and there are social norms, and we say we are a capitalist, democratic society, and those are the rules you have to abide by to operate. And if you are a major tech company who didn't need AI to become a world-leading company, who built lots of infrastructure and built offices and built all these resources within these countries and hoarded the resources and then sent them back and then developed AI because it was the only way you could confuse regulators and make it much more complicated, then we do have to be very honest that that's not capitalism and it's not meritocracy, that's colonialism, and that has an impact. And so you can disrupt within the rules of the social contract, and you know, that's what we accept, that's what we allow. And when you disrupt beyond that, I mean, it's sort of fine, but there will be a backlash, and that backlash won't necessarily be good.
Sorry, Paul, you're going to have to follow up on that.
Okay. No, I agree there's a certain parasitic quality to what's been created. And yeah, as someone who, I suppose, is representing, and we make films, we're designers, we're creators, all those sort of things in the company that I run. And there is, we have had to just face the fact that we're using tools that have hoovered up the work of others and then regenerate it and spit it out. I mean, there is the ethical dilemma that we face every day when we use those tools. And to some extent, we're always ahead of regulation because the nature of being creative as well is that you're always going to be experimenting and trying things. You want to see what the next big thing is, and it's actually very exciting. So that's all cool. But we've kind of realised that if we want to try and do this ethically, we have to sort of establish some of our own ground rules, even if they're really basic. Like, let's try and not prompt with the name of an illustrator that we know, because that's stealing their intellectual property, or the labour of their creative brains. So, I'm not a regulatory expert by any means, but I can say that a lot of the clients we work with, to be fair to them, are also trying to get ahead of where I think we are probably at government level. And they're creating their own frameworks, their own trust frameworks to try and address some of these things, because everyone is starting to ask questions. And then you don't want to be the person that's accidentally creating a system where everything is then suable because of what you've made or what you've generated. So, I think we're trying to stay ahead of it as much as we possibly can.
Thank you, Paul. Does anyone know how Studio Ghibli got on with suing OpenAI? Anyone? Do you know?
Well, but I think we've got Midjourney being sued by Disney now.
Good.
So that will be interesting to see. Because I think one of the possible outcomes is you ain't putting the word Pixar in Midjourney anytime soon. But what will they get? It's going to have to be a heck of a fine to unwind a lot of the stuff that's
it would just be the cost of doing business. We were talking about Margaret Vestager when she was heading up the European Commission. She was so hard on big tech. She's now not in there, and the European Commission have got their teeth when it comes to big tech companies, I don't think. But Google were being sued record fines, and I guess they would see it as the cost of doing business. I think they stacked up their fines against their revenues for the quarter or something, and it was less than 1%. So it is literally just the cost of doing business. So I think for goodwill, OpenAI would probably take on board the cease and desist, and they would stop doing it. But it will just move over to something. It'll move over to another area of AI. OpenAI might not do it, but another AI platform may pop up to focus specifically on that. Slight aside, I'm a big Studio Ghibli fan, so it was a bit frustrating when I saw that come out. But I did take advantage of the Muppets one, and I'm also a big Jim Henson fan. So what are you going to do? Stephanie, this is going to be an opportunity for you to dig into your last point. So hopefully more rounds of applause, maybe even some cries from the audience. So, and I think this is where you can really expand on the colonialism thing, and maybe, I know you've got some other areas where you could take that. So, looking at this through a policy and ethics lens, what concerns you most about the current direction of AI governance, or lack of? That doesn't say that. And how should companies get ahead of the curve rather than maintain a defensive reactionary approach?
Okay, so I think to your earlier point as well, I think we need to honestly ask if this is the next big thing. And if this actually is innovation, and what the point of innovation is. Is the point of innovation 15-minute deliveries? Is the point of innovation writing emails that you didn't ever really want to send? Or writing novels that you were never going to really read? Or, 20 million Studio Ghibli knockoffs? Like, is that the best we can hope for? Because we're investing in all this tech, and actually education levels are declining, life expectancy is declining, poverty is rising, all of these big core problems that we said we were going to focus on are now getting worse, and we're solving problems that are sort of not really problems. I mean, I didn't know about Studio Ghibli until OpenAI, and great job Studio Ghibli. I don't really care about what OpenAI is producing, because it's not meaningful to what it means to the human condition, or to be human, or for like what I imagine the future of progress to be. And so that's not to say AI isn't relevant, it's just it is relevant insofar as it makes human lives meaningfully better. And until we've got the baseline of everybody having food, the planet being secure, people getting healthcare, that the knocking off creative things and just breaking the laws willy-nilly is like not really exciting for me. It doesn't make me think, wow, we are progressing. Like, actually it makes me think that putting billions into these platforms that are one single source of truth, of knowledge, is probably a little bit dangerous. And getting rid of individual rights and people's privacy rights and their IP rights is probably going backwards. Of course everybody's investing in Gen AI, because imagine if you had everybody just looking at one source of truth, and you could do ads in that and you could control what they believe. Like, that's totalitarianism, and like a lot of this is taking us backwards and we don't recognise it. And so to your question, one of my biggest challenges with the AI governance debate is that it's not a debate. It's actually everybody in agreement that we need tech that we don't need, that's destroying the fabric of our society, and we can't even have a conversation about it. So on the governance piece, you can debate whether there should be regulation or there shouldn't be regulation, and you can make it seem like we're really having a conversation. But actually both sides agree that we all have to use AI. On the conversation about fairness, how much should people get paid when their data is being used, or maybe people shouldn't get paid at all? Is this exploitation? Like, you actually all agree that people should be working for the machine, and we don't really get to have that basic conversation of where do we need AI, if we need it at all. And AI is a powerful tool. It's sort of like a chainsaw, and we're just using chainsaws like butter toast everywhere. And AI governance is like, well, how did you make the chainsaw? And it's just so irrelevant right now, and people are getting hurt left, right and centre because we won't ask the most basic questions of what is this and do we need it?
I set you up prior to that question. Apologies, I didn't mean to give you a mark you needed to attain. But I do disagree with the front of your statement that we are building AI to do things that make us human. We're doing it to take away all of the things that our creative output. the things that differentiate us from animals, the things that differentiate from inanimate objects. We're getting it to recreate Studio Ghibli and Jim Henson and write poems and do all the wonderful things that we do as human beings. We're not getting it to do all the laborious crap stuff that we don't want to do.
Sort of, but just to add, sorry, that like the thing that we do as humans that's really amazing is that we love each other. And through love we create, and there's something so magical about that we capture, and AI doesn't do that. AI can knock off what other people have created.
I disagree with you again, because I think the number one use case for men of a certain age for... You know where I'm going with this, don't you? You all know.
Right, that's not love.
I was just going to say, what is love? Let's get into a philosophical debate about what is love, but a chemical reaction in our brains, and if that can be catalysed by an engagement online with AI, then is that any different from having your first kiss in a cinema? That was my first kiss, that's where that came from. Is it any different? They think they're in love. They think they're in love with an AI. So there's so much we can go into there. I don't think we've got time for it.
That might be a digression.
If you want to have a chat with us at the end, we can chat with you at the bar and talk about whether AI can create meaningful engagements, interactions of love. But has anyone else want to wade in on that debate? Please. Not specifically the AI love.
I mean, what if we're not special, basically? Like, what if all the patterns that are in part of us aren't that special? The only reason I bring that up is that I think every career you associate your identity with what you do. Maybe we shouldn't, maybe that's a bad thing. But I know that creatives really associate with what they do. Their identity is tied up in what it is that they actually do, whether they're an illustrator or whatever. And there is that it is a proper existential crisis to look at it and go, oh, the thing that I thought was special can be regurgitated pretty easily, and by the way, it's now getting pretty emotional, and by the way, people are now falling in love with it. It's a terrifying thing to stare into, the Gorgon, and look back at it and think, where are we going with this? So, by the way, I do think we're special, but maybe we're not as special as we think we are, and a lot of these patterns can be matched.
Please.
Well, I just want to ask, what problems do you want these technologies to solve? To both of your points, do you want them to solve the question of, I can't write a novel, or I can't draw a picture? Or do you want it to solve the question of, how do we efficiently allocate water in a pipe network so that everyone gets the right amount of water in the day? And for me, that latter point is really where all these technologies have come from, actually. We were able to solve that problem on paper 70 years ago. Now we can solve it with a computer in hours rather than days. But has anybody actually asked for a computer that can draw them a picture of a capital table? I certainly haven't, and I feel, to your point, it's kind of being forced into us a little bit, and now put this thing on a pedestal, and now we're going to tilt all of our water resources, our energy resources, our financial resources are going to be pushed towards this type of technology.
Yeah, it's going to be a race to the bottom. And I think I've spent a lot of my time in the advertising and marketing industry, and that's where we're seeing a lot of use cases from it that are just superfluous. They're just absolute dross, rubbish, that marketing agencies, not you guys obviously, marketing agencies are churning out examples of where AI can just regurgitate, remix, copy instantly in real time, just download that constantly out, and that's the race to the bottom. That's the race to the bottom to out. But look, we've got two more questions to get through, so this has gone quite quick. This has gone quite quick. We've got two questions to get through, and actually the next one, Paul, is for you, and this is for you to own. And we've kind of touched on it, and it's around the copyright, the government stance on copyright law. But from your perspective in the creative industry, how is AI changing the way ideas are generated? So based on kind of the narrative, the context of which we've just been speaking about, how is AI changing the ways ideas are being generated and brought to life? And what ethical questions does this raise around originality, authorship, and creative integrity?
Okay, so a lot to unpack there, but it is a really great question. I mean, I think I might even start with the originality part of it anyway, because what is originality? It's extremely hard to do that. If anyone who's ever tried to create anything knows, you're trying to break patterns, you're trying to find or remix or mash up something that hasn't happened before, which to some extent is a good thing, that really we're talking about pattern matching tools. So generally speaking, when you're going, to your first part of your question, it's used in every part of the creative process now. And most agencies, certainly the big ones, certainly anyone that's working on a lot of marketing stuff, like you say, they're using it to try and drive efficiencies and get incredible margins. But they're going to be on the race to the bottom, as we all know. But originality is hard to quantify. I just think that actually it doesn't happen as much as people think anyway. That originality, when you look at some of the things that ChatGPT or any of these tools, there's a lot of interesting new tools that are out there that purport to kind of help you in the quest to come up with ideas. And they can be useful. Quite often we'll use them to sift out the crappy ideas. Because if ChatGPT or an AI tool can come up with it, it's probably something that's happened before, something that we probably don't want to use. But equally, I'm also quite often seeing it and going, I've seen ideas like that in decks before. I think there's certain things that we get lazy. And what I think any creative needs to understand now is you're going to have to be extremely interesting, and you're going to have to push even more humanity into what you do, or you're going to be easily replaced by these tools that probably shouldn't be doing all the fun stuff that we want to do. And if the ethical questions are around, for me, there's a bunch, but including the copyright thing, but there's partly just around purpose and fun. Like, why do we even do this stuff? Why do we do it? Like, there's a whole industry that exists for people with wonderful brains, and there's lots of different types of industries that suit different types of brains. But why are we trying to do away with something that allows people to get up in the morning and have a reason to live? So that is a big question. And my second ethical thing is, what do we do with the next generation who don't learn craft and quality, and they don't go through the same hurdles? And they may find ways to use it in ways that we can't imagine, because that's what young people do, and I've got a lot of faith in that. But I also think, how are you going to learn the language that helps you interface with, say, a video model, and you know what a camera does, and you know how to ask for the right things, you know how to tell a story, and you know what's right, and you know what taste is. All that is an ethical issue. Like, we might be taking that away from an entire generation. And by the way, it's stealing everyone's stuff. So there's that too.
We've only got 5 minutes left. I'm being given the note for it, which is a real shame, because we were having a conversation with you obviously the other day about originality, and actually we are only the sum of everything that we've seen before, and so is AI. So how can it be any different from what we create? It's just done synthetically rather than via human, not authentically via a human. There's also that I'd love a creative director coming back with his sort of junior creative guy and saying, stick more humanity in it, stuff some more humanity in it, it doesn't look human enough, just to get it across the line. So we've got, I wonder if we, in the next 5 minutes, there's one question for you, Alex, and I'd like to do a quick fire round. So Alex, if you can answer this question in 2 minutes, that would be really helpful.
That's right.
When utilising AI for research or analysis, how do you manage the trade-offs between building high-performing models and making sure they're fair and understandable?
So the example that I often give to people is through my experience working with things like climate models and environmental systems and things like that, which is where my academic background is. And we always had very strong guidance within our organisations, within our universities, within our research groups. Everything we did should be explainable. You should be able to understand why, when it rains on day X, you get a certain amount of river flow on day Y. And to do that, we based our models not on necessarily on machine learning principles, although there were people who flirted with things like fractals and different sorts of synthetic generation. But we used things like laboratory measurements, observations of what you can see in the lab. And I think that's one of the things that we are missing with these technologies, is we cannot do that. We cannot explain things, and we refuse to kind of take the steps that are necessary to implement that sort of understanding the technology.
Well, that's what the governance needs to provide. It needs to provide a level of explainability so that we understand how the sausage is made. That's what's not being given to us because that's the proprietary.
So the governance can provide some of that, but in many cases with these technologies, it's a fundamental redesign of how the model itself is created that is required.
Yeah. Right, so we've got 3 minutes left. Does that include questions? That's it. So no questions, sorry guys. You'll have to come and talk to us at the bar at the end. It's been a super fascinating debate. I hope you've all enjoyed it. But before you run off, we have one final question which I hope you can all answer in the time lady's time parameter there. It's like the person of doom. Quick fire round. If you could change one thing, be it policy, process, culture or tooling, to make responsible AI the norm rather than the exception, what would it be? Paul?
Culture, if you're a leader, stand up, be open, speak to everyone in your company, make sure they know what you're doing, and just accept that it's complete Wild West to some extent, but be open.
Alex?
I would like people to stand up and say no to things that they don't believe are actually something we should be delegating to a thing.
Oh, there's just so much, is there, in that question. If we all just stood up and stopped using OpenAI before they were more ethical, then it would be a real big kick in the teeth, but I would listen. Stephanie, final word from you. What's the one thing that you would change?
I would want you all to know that you are special. Actually, you're really special. It's really special to be human. ChatGPT, these systems, they use 10,000 to 100,000 neurons to come up with this, and your brain uses 86 billion alone. And when you talk to somebody else, that is exponential. Like, there is not enough water in the world to run a computation as good as you speaking to one person. We have spent trillions trying to make a robotic hand, and that will never be as powerful as when one hand holds another when you are suffering. Like, to be alive is incredible, and these tools are cool, but they are not comparable to humans. So I feel like if we knew that and accepted it, we wouldn't fall into so many of these traps and this propaganda to pull us down and take control.
Can I just keep you there a minute? I'm just going to say a couple of closing words, Greg. Just go back.
I thought it was done, sorry.
Sorry, no, just to kind of wrap things up. Thank you so much, panel, because I think what you've done there is explore some of those issues which are really pertinent for all of us. And when we start thinking about what AI is and how it affects all of us, we're often getting carried away by how fun it is, how exciting it is, how to keep our jobs sometimes. You've been able to open up the philosophical issues, and that's been really valuable, so thank you for that. I think the challenge for us now is how do we bring all of that together into setting out the guardrails, the principles, the values, the governance, and ultimately, is it regulation as well? Does the government have to get involved in doing this, or can industry do it by itself? And I think that's a perfect segue also into the next session, where we'll be looking at the role of big tech versus what's the opposite to big tech? Is it small tech, decentralised tech as well? So the next session, I think, is the pick up where this session passes off. But I just wanted to kind of say thank you to that, because one of the things that I find really exciting about this whole debate, being part of the trade association that represents AI industries in the UK, is it gets very philosophical. And this debate, this panel you guys have got into, it gets really philosophical, which is something that reminds us of the humanity, which Stephanie, I think you did in particular. So that was really, really great panel. Thank you very much to all of the panellists. Now you can walk off stage.